right, part two. Here we are. I decided to change the resolution I'm recording at and some of my other settings. So these will probably be uploaded as two separate videos. Uh, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. So, anyways, twice as many videos means twice as much, twice as many views, right? That's how it works, you know. Everybody who watched the first one is coming back to see our Lost Chapter 3. So here we go. Let's get that started here. Chapter 3. A bunch of irrelevant side characters are introduced. Yeah, so we're really going with the meta title here because, of course, we are. I was a little self-critical back then. I don't know if you picked up on that. It was pretty subtle, but okay, here we go. Dr. Albert Runley stood quietly in the elevator. He was in charge of Lab 7, a massive room filled with water and only a part of the massive mansion owned by the founder of old-style hotels. The lab contained quarters for sleeping and meals, suspended within a large bubble-shaped structure. The bubble was made of one of those newfangled smart materials. Runley's job was quite simple. Every day, at around noon, he put on a diving suit and a rubber suit over it, and took a crate of wands out into the water. He tested each wand with the same spell, and sorted them into two bins. A green bin for wands that worked, and a red bin for the wands that didn't. The final step was to send the bins down an elevator to Lab 8 for processing or some such. However, yesterday, both bins had been sent back, unchanged, without any indication of why. Albert was on his way to Lab 8 now, and he looked straight ahead through the clear doors at Lab 8 as his elevator arrived. The doors opened quickly, and he stepped carefully onto the white tile floor. The room he had stepped into was the transportation hub above Lab 8. A few crates of wands, marked with red paint, Lab 3, rejects, Lab 2, wonky designs, and Lab 5, biohazard parts, were strewn about the ground, and the walls had 7 elevator shafts built in. One of said shafts, which led to Lab 5, opened to reveal the leader of said lab. Albert, slightly surprised, asked, "What is the leader of Lab 5 doing here? Haven't you wasted enough of the program's valuable time?" And then I have 3 stars there, but I want to kind of take a break and talk about this. So, I made sort of a chart, and I did some world building, in my notes, basically. And it was like, here's what each and every single one of these 9 labs does, even if maybe we're not going to necessarily get to all of them. This fan fiction is partially based on my original story that I wrote, which is basically set in the same location, entirely within this 9 lab complex that Mr. Old has. It's set a bit later in the timeline. I made a point last chapter 2, of saying that Mr. Old is 45 because this is supposed to be a few years before the events of the novel. So that way, I don't really have to. So that way, I know where and when it takes place, and I can sort of de-age the characters a little bit. Some stuff is not finished. In this one, basically, they're still building the labs. We don't really get into that. I don't think very much in the actual fan fiction, but here and there we do mention it. Not all of them are finished. Basically, they're still constructing. We do see Mary run through sort of an in progress section of construction. So, but yeah, so like when I say Lab 3 rejects, Lab 2 wonky designs, and Lab 5 biohazard parts, that's supposed to tell you, like, okay, the biohazards live in Lab 5, and Lab 2 is where they design the wands, and they are also doing some kind of wand testing, I believe, in Lab 3. So now, I mean, unless I went back and looked at my notes, I really couldn't tell you exactly what they're doing in Lab 3. But that was my attempt at clever world building. So, and then let's go to the next section here. Chen Luo, the leader of Lab 5, was having another boring day. She had woken up in her small living space next to the biohazard containment zone to hear the biohazards shrieking like howler monkeys. They had the ability to imitate any animal on Earth, and despite living their entire lives in a sugary prison, managed to sound like some of the most annoying creatures possible. Once, she had sworn they did an impression of Jar Jar Binks from Star Wars. Wow, we're really dating this with the topical humor here, like back when people. Anyways, Chen groaned and ran a hairbrush through her black, shoulder-length hair as she folded her bed back into the wall. She stomped a foot on the floor, and a chair rose up out of the floor on a cushion of air, and sat down at her computer. "Morning," she mumbled to it. So, like, oh, I'm being so clever. I'm introducing what color and length her hair is, but I'm also having her do an action. I'm being very economical with my words. And then I use the word chair twice. Oh, I use the word floor twice in the same sentence. Like immediately after that. Woof. Okay. Good morning, Miss Luo. Use the tooth cleaning packet before ordering breakfast. The dumbwaiter next to the computer opened, and Chen grabbed the grape-shaped packet. She bit down on it, and an explosion of minty freshness covered her teeth. She then yawned, and the chemicals turned to water, which she swished around before gulping it back down. The tooth-cleaning water was pure H2O, which meant it was too plain for her taste. I guess, like, this is me doing wish fulfillment about, I wish it was easier to brush your teeth, because, but like, and I think maybe I was in chemistry class, like, I was writing this while I was in high school, so I think maybe I had done some sort of theoretical work about how, like, well, like, maybe there's a chemical reaction out there that can change your toothpaste into water that quickly. Maybe I had done like stoichiometry and stuff and like figured that out, but I don't remember. Input breakfast order. Chen wished she could tell the computer to shut up, but knew from experience that it would reply with an annoying command not recognized, followed by a list of every command that the computer could recognize. The usual, Chen ordered. 10 minutes later, she splashed water on her face and stepped out of her cramped room into the biohazard imprisonment area. The biohazards were creatures taller than the average human, covered from head to toe in armor. They grew somehow. Jen didn't want to know much about the biohazards. Their tentacle tongues and elephant's feet disgusted her. They watched her from the shadows as she walked past the sugar-covered bars that repelled them. Chen threw her fork at one, and it clanged off the thing's armor. She left the biohazards to whatever it was they did. Aside from her room and food, Chen reaped none of the benefits of being the leader of Lab 5. Being leader of Lab 5 is like being the queen of your own wasteland, Chen thought. The only thing here that's any good is the space for running. She was running now through the massive padded hallway that was Lab 5. As she ran, she remembered how she had gotten this job in the first place. She had been a hotshot, fresh out of college, already working as an engineer for FitBunch, a company that made physical activity monitoring equipment. Oh, I spelled monitoring wrong. FitBunch. I wonder what that's a reference to. It's very clever. You're so clever, Fast Me. You're really pulling one over us with calling it that. Okay, anyways. She tested all the products herself on leisurely morning jogs to the office. The management had been ready to offer her a promotion after only half a year. Then, out of nowhere, the founder of Old Style Hotels had offered her quadruple her salary, plus room and board to be the resident designer and tester of fitness-oriented wand components at his mansion. Jen accepted the deal. Half a decade later, here she was, stuck in Lab 5 until the end of time, earning money that she couldn't use. The process of becoming the leader of a lab involved signing a contract that a younger Chen had skipped to the end of after reading 20 of 100 pages, 10-point font and full of confusing legal jargon. I don't think you're allowed to do that, but I think I've worked at a job or two where they actually asked me to sign a non-compete clause. Well, they asked me to sign like a contract that had a non-compete clause in it. And I was like, really? This is stupid. Like, whatever happened to the free marketplace? You know, when it comes to when it comes to working, like, aren't you on the labor market? The companies love unregulated markets, but as soon as anyway, I guess that's not really the point, but I feel like you might be able to get out of that kind of a contract if it's legitimately formatted to be hard to read, like 10-point font and opaque about everything. After signing the contract, she had to either sign another within a month to leave and never disclose anything about the labs, or stay for another 20 years before she had another chance to leave. Like, see, now that really does, I don't think that's legal. Like, I don't think that's enforceable. If you make a contract like that, like, what, you're married to your job? You're just stuck working at the same place? That doesn't seem right. I really ended up writing a dystopian future, didn't I? Anyway, so let's see. The first month and a half of Chen's job had been actual wand component design, but since then she had been little more than a guard for the biohazards. The first couple of fitness wand designs were clunky because the technology was new to her, and there had been no second chances. Chen reached the end of the lab and started jogging back again towards her room. She knew everything about Lab 5, having examined it thoroughly and even built scale models in her spare time. It was an incredibly long cement hallway with mats on the ceiling, floor, walls, and the pillars that supported the weight of the 4 labs on top of it. The only slightly interesting thing she'd been able to change about it was install a rainbow of matte colors, starting at the elevator next to her room with red and ending in violet. So much for being a leader. Come on, she thought to herself, do something fun. Get out and explore the labs. Who cares what the other 7 people here think? The least you can do is check this place out. It's not like anyone's going to stop you. Fine, Shen said aloud. I'll go down to Lab 8 and see Mary. Don't talk to yourself. It makes you sound crazy. Chen resisted the urge to respond to herself as she stepped into the elevator and pressed the number 8. There was no music in the elevator, which she vowed to fix one day by starting her own band. Chen played the electric guitar, but had been unable to practice since being hired. The elevator came to a stop at Lab 8, and as she stepped out, she noticed Dr. Runley from Lab 7. "What is the leader of Lab 5 doing here? Haven't you wasted enough of the program's valuable time?" he said with a frown. "For your information, I was just going to visit Mary. I had no idea that socializing was something you had a problem with. I declined your Scrabble night invitations for other reasons," Chen retorted, before starting to walk towards Mary's living space. Okay, so a couple things. There's only 8 labs in this one, because the 9th lab is like this gigantic cavern, basically, that was dug out underneath the rest of them. So I kind of imagined that they would still be working on it because it would take the most time to build. Like, it's the biggest one. It's just a big heckin' thing hidden underground, deep underground, like underneath all the other labs. And so, yeah, that's why there's only 8 in this story, because it's earlier in the timeline. And then the other thing is, there's no music in the elevator. This is a reference to the story, because one of the characters does actually get into an elevator in the story, like later on, and there's this weird music playing. I described it as like a mix of classical and rock or something like that. And so I wanted to set that up in this one and be like, hey, look, that's actually Chen Luo, leader of Lab 5. She's the one who's playing the guitar. Isn't that nifty? So that's like sort of, I guess, an Easter egg or something. The other story is also, so the main story is really long, so I kind of imagined that people would give up before they ever got to that point. I think the only one who read it was me, but I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments if you've read it. And if you haven't and you want to, I think I can put a link in the description. I think I can, but I don't know if I will remember to do that. Future me, remember to do that. It seems, shockingly, that we have something in common. I too wish to speak to Mary, but purely for work-related reasons. Runley ran to catch up with Chen. I hope you can wait 5 minutes without deciding to do something else, unlike the rest of your generation. She kept walking, ignoring his comment to gain the moral high ground. At least I know that arguing is the childish thing to do, she thought. Oh look, we're here. Chen pressed the button for the door, and it irised open to reveal Mr. Old and Mary, talking in hushed tones in the corner of the massive room, while the secretary tried to look as inconspicuous as a robotic orb suspended below an array of computer processor-filled rings could look. Such a bad sentence. It's like, I really should read my stories out loud, because I would just fix the phrasing of so much of it, I think, if I did. Let's see. Could look. The secretary turned to them and rearranged her rings slightly. Ah, if it isn't Dr. Runley and Miss Luo. I regret to inform you that at the present time Mary is occupied. At this, Mr. Old and Mary rushed over to the small room in the other corner of Lab 8. The secretary continued, shaking her head slightly. Unless there is some service you require of me, I suggest you return at a later time. Albert stopped staring at the room that Robert and Mary had rushed into. Oh my god, I said they rushed into it twice. Long enough to hear this, and spoke up. Actually, I wanted to know why these, he held up the 2 boxes, have been sent back to Lab 7 with wands still in them. As sorting wands is what you do, I am interested in your excuse for these unsorted wands. The secretary looked down at the boxes, thoroughly examining them. Chen, meanwhile, had questions of her own for the robot. What are those two doing in that room? Also, could you send me some materials to build wands again? I promise, this time I won't let the program down. The secretary looked up from the boxes, eyeing Chen with her single glowing orange eye before replying. At this time, I am unable to control what you are and are not allowed to build, Miss Luo. Perhaps you should take up this topic with Mr. Old. Chen sighed and walked over to one of the white panel walls to mope. Albert, on the other hand, was tapping his foot and glaring at the secretary. As for you, Dr. Runley, I regret to inform you that normal research and testing operations have been put on hold at this time. I suggest you return to your laboratory and wait for the board meeting at 1 p.m. today. Albert stepped back, astonished. There's never been a meeting at 1 before. This is also the first time operations have stopped since the first lab opened back in 2033. What's going on here? The secretary didn't respond. Tell me, Albert yelled. Chen looked up and saw Mr. Old exiting Mary's room. Pointing at Mr. Old, Chen asked, Why don't you question him? Bob always has the answers. As a matter of fact, I will, right now, Albert said before turning to Mr. Old and repeating his question. Operations stopped, meetings at 11. What is going on here, Old? Each question made Robert Old flinch. He took a moment to compose himself before dignifying Albert's questions with a response. It is with great regret that I inform you today of my official withdrawal from my position as Old Hotel's Chief Executive Officer. In recognition of this event, I have called a meeting to discuss the limits that must now be placed on the 8 laboratories. Due to new budget constraints, it seems that we will be limited to 55% of our former wand production and 22% of our former wand testing capabilities. All staff will be reevaluated for lower paychecks, and the grounds outside will be reduced significantly. I apologize and take full responsibility for the cause and consequences of becoming unemployed. The room was completely silent for a moment. Then there was a flash of yellow light, and the white alicorn appeared in the center of Lab 8. Before anyone could react, they were all surrounded by a yellow glow. With a final flash of light, they were gone. Oh my god. I was gonna bring everyone? Okay. Man, you can really tell that I have not read this in a while, can't you? There goes the train. You probably can't hear the train. I can hear it though. So that was our Lost Chapter 3. I genuinely did not remember that. I was going to kidnap all of these characters and bring them all into Equestria. I'm glad I did not do that. So, a problem with this story that may be apparent now, even though this didn't happen necessarily until later, there's too many characters. So, in the first 2-3 chapters, we've got our principal cast. We've got Lemmy, we've got Celestia, we've got Mary and Bob, and we've got a bunch of robots. And that's probably enough characters for me to juggle. That's probably already enough. I don't want the reader to have to make a chart the same way I did to keep track of everybody. And so, in hindsight, introducing literally plopping down extra characters in chapter 3 just immediately seems like a bad call. I can recognize that. Now we end up building up a lot of extra characters anyway. Like chapter 4 is sort of like that. But the advantage of it is it's a lot of equestrian characters. So it's people that our readership on filmfiction.net is probably already familiar with. So there's not quite as much of an overload, I guess. Like there's not really an information overload with that, because it's like, yeah, you know who these people, you know who the main 6 are, right? You're here, you're reading My Little Pony fan fiction, you must know all of this already. So then, like, that's the advantage of the fan fiction. And with Celestia, like, you already know who she is too. She's the head honcho, right? So, like, yeah, like, I'm kind of glad that I scrapped this. It's an interesting idea. There's some cool world building about, like, the labs and how things were developing, and that Easter egg was really fun. But, like, in hindsight, maybe don't introduce a bunch of extra characters and drop them on your audience when they're already trying to sort of get to know everybody. Maybe don't do that. So, gosh, well, I'm so excited. I just want to keep going. I'm going to cut the recording here, but I'm probably going to immediately do chapter 4 as well. I mean, we'll see how long it takes to edit these. So.